All right, so welcome back to another podcast episode on the Data Professor YouTube channel. Today we have a special guest on the channel. We have Jess Haberman, and I think it's best if Jess, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm Director of Learning Solutions at Anaconda. I actually previously was Senior Acquisitions Editor at O'Reilly Media, overseeing sort of the data science and data engineering space. In Anaconda, we're developing a learning platform to help folks upskill and reskill in data science, data engineering, machine learning, all that great stuff, learning Python. So yeah, I'm really happy to be on the show today.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and a pleasure to have you. Yeah, so before we get started with other questions, I guess it would be awesome to start with a short introductory story about your career journey into the data domain.
Yeah. So I have a pretty non-technical background. I've been in book publishing my entire career, so like 14 years. From a few different book publishers. I started in sort of outdoor recreation publishing, hiking, camping, climbing, stuff like that. Moved into a more traditional trade publishing, cookbooks and health and fitness, all kinds of stuff. And then, I always sort of I was for the publishing side, I was pretty technical, and sort of was fascinated by technology. And then this opportunity at O'Reilly Media opened up. And at that time, it was an editor for overseeing product management and UX design. So kind of, a little bit more technical. And I was doing that for a few months, and this opportunity opened up more on the data engineering side. And sort of they really needed someone. It was a space that was really heating up. So I moved over and started to learn that space. And it was definitely a trial by fire. It's really an exciting space to learn, but again, like very technical. And so I had to get up to speed like pretty quickly. So did a lot of that by just like talking to a lot of the experts in the space. I found that, people doing work in data tend to be pretty open and happy to answer questions and generous with their time and very informative. So I learned a lot. I remember going to the O'Reilly Strata conference in San Francisco and just like begging people to talk to me like I was a third grader and like tell me what they were doing and why it was important. And I learned so much, just talking to people and I still, do that all the time. I think that's what's really exciting is being able to learn constantly. I think that's been the case, in my career in publishing and certainly, developing learning content at Anaconda. And, and it was just so exciting to talk to Peter Wang and the folks at Anaconda about just like they wanted to develop more content, more education for people learning Python and learning data science. And that was definitely in my wheelhouse. And I really like the idea to be able to start from scratch and sort of curate that experience for people. So it was an exciting jump. And here we are. It feels kind of incredible to realize I've been at Anaconda almost a year. I think it was right around PyCon when I joined last year. And we've been able to do quite a lot. It's obviously a pretty fast-paced area. So we've been able to really accomplish so much and getting great feedback from our users who are learning a lot, about data and Python.
Right. Yeah. A very amazing journey. So like yourself, I'm also from a non-technical background as well. I had my first degree in biology, and I stumbled upon data science like during research, like during my first year of research, and ever since I used it for my research thesis, and used it ever since. And the field at the time was called data mining. And data science took off about like 2012. I've got involved in YouTube since 2019. And my only work at the time was like for 15 years, working in academia, teaching, doing research as a professor. And so in the last 1.5 years, I left academia and then joined tech. And I'm currently working as a developer advocate.
That's very cool. Yeah. And that sort of like that the teaching skills you gain, in academia, I mean, are just so relevant in in industry and like and for YouTube and things like that. I mean, YouTube is certainly a huge resource for learning. Especially if you can do it well. I think as like tech, as we see sort of these big strides in technology and in data, this sort of like having the personality of like a strong trainer, a strong instructor who can connect with learners is like something you can't recreate. Like I don't see like ChatGPT being able to replace that anytime soon, So yeah, I think those are like great skills in sort of these different areas.
Right, certainly. And yeah, like, like when people ask me, like, you spent like almost half of your life, like doing research, teaching, and, like, working in academia, and then finally joining tech, it's like, do you think it's like a waste of your time to go through academia and then finally join tech? But then like, I sort of discovered during this past year that a lot of the skill from academia, like as you mentioned, teaching, content creation, like going through literature, doing research on information, it's actually quite similar, and the skill are like readily transferable. And yeah, I guess it's like the path took me to data science, and from academia, that helped me to discover about data science. And so, yeah, here we are today.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. Like I feel like I learned, a lot about content creation and about, how to think about content as a business, and how to find your niche and find your audience and make sure that you're really honing your message to your audience. Like that is like really a really important skill. And I think there's sort of there's folks in data science who are developing content and some who, that doesn't necessarily interest them. But I think if that's an area and if you want to help others and teach others, yeah, it's really helpful to have that sort of basis. And certainly publishing and tech are very, very different, industries. But certainly a lot of like skills that carried over well for me.
Yeah. And actually, it was always my dream, like to someday publish a book with an animal, on the cover.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
From O'Reilly. And yeah, hopefully sometime soon I could explore that as well.
Yeah, let me know if I can help you at all. It's great. I miss that a lot. Like I love working with folks on books, like just listening to their ideas and helping them formulate like, how to turn that into a large project that's good, and how to like, how to think about the way you're going to work on a book for the next year or two, like it takes a long time, like, and even when you finish, you're not finished, like how do you then promote your work and how do you make sure that it's reaching your audience and things like that? It's like, it's really rewarding. I think either you write a book to be involved in sort of the book writing process and editing process. And it's great. Oh, and O'Reilly is, world class. So yeah, I think it's a really great goal for you. Makes total sense.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Like when I was in academia, like most of like the work that I publish are like predominantly based on my research. Sometimes I would do like some tertiary information based on like compiling information from the primary literature and then like summarizing that. And most of the work or ideas are based on like the ideas that like my research group would create and then like create a thesis around that. But in terms of like publishing in tech or generally as a book, I guess it's much more than like what the authors want to write about, right?
Yeah.
I guess there's other information like what's the market demand for such a topic, and yeah, would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that's the big jump from academia, right? Is understanding like, yeah, the market and the business side. And, because you may have a great idea, but if like someone else has a great idea, that's already kind of like the market is sort of built around and sort of and sort of pushing up and prioritizing, then it's hard. It's very hard to sort of find your niche there. It's, I think there's opportunities to find gaps in knowledge where that you can fill. And often I think it's about thinking about the way that people kind of where the biggest challenges are and like how you can develop content that's solving those problems or is helping, is giving people tools to improve their work, to improve their career, and just like tapping into like what is motivating people, and then being able to offer that content in a way that is organized, and it just like helps them sort of build up on their own skills, and is more about kind of integrating with their work than like kind of just like telling, so it's like, how do you help people kind of get those hands-on skills, and excuse me, and and I think researching the research part, I think folks from academia understand very well, but thinking about a little bit like, how do you understand sort of like what is relevant in the market, because it has to be recent too, right? Like it has to be like this space is changing so fast that a book that was published 5 years ago may be completely irrelevant, or may not be, sort of depending on the focus. But thinking about the way that you approach a book in terms of how technical is it, how do you approach with enough technical detail without making the book irrelevant, shortly, because those tools are going to change. So finding the right balance is tricky too. So there's like so many aspects that I think like you kind of have to grow, and you have to kind of learn as you do it. Like very few people jump into a book knowing everything that they need to communicate to their readers. You learn it as you write it. So so it's sort of it's quite a process.
Right. Based on your like prior experience working in the book industry, what's like the typical like acceptance rate for, like from an author suggested idea to acceptance? Or
it totally depends. So I think there are a few different ways a publisher might work, so they might be sort of intaking a lot of ideas. They might have sort of a process through which that they review ideas that are coming to them, or they might have relationships with like agents, which is not common in technical publishing. And then there's the other way where really the acquisitions editors are generating the ideas, and then finding the right talent to develop that content. And then there's a lot of mixing of the two. So I would say at O'Reilly, we were more on the latter side, more like we know the program we want to build, we know the topics that we want, we know people in the space. Now we just kind of have to like organize all those ideas together. So there's that process, and there's the so when you're on that end of the spectrum, you're having more success usually because you're driving the strategy more, rather than, I'm taking hundreds of proposals and I'm maybe accepting a few. And so I think at O'Reilly, probably like 50 to 60% of the proposals that got started or were sent to us, would be accepted, and we would move forward with a contract. And then like 10% of those may not actually get published. There's a lot of times there, for a lot of reasons, projects kind of get hung up and never quite make it to the finish line. I think there are definitely other publishers in this space who have even fewer projects get published. And that's maybe part of their model is like, well, we're going to try more ideas. We're going to try more. We're going to invest in more. And and then help weed out, those projects that aren't going to get sort of on the market. So it could totally, it may differ very like a lot between different publishers depending on their strategies.
Right. Yeah. Like for myself, like I haven't really published in a more like a technical book, like for coding. But based on my own publication history, I mostly publish in like Elsevier as a book chapter, and like research publication in various journals. Yeah, but yeah, I guess that this is something that I would be interested in and probably take a deeper dive in.
Yeah, and I think even like the pace is a big difference. Like publishing is a slow process, compare like, especially when you're used to being in tech where everything was so fast, like, and you get responses and like things are always moving, and there's a lot of progress, and not to say publishing isn't progressive, but in some ways it is, but I think like it slows the process down for good reason to really drive high quality content and make sure, you're sort of going through all the motions, because when you skip ahead or you try to publish too fast, like the audience will see it. So I think that's another like a difference. And and that's a real challenge. Certainly like at Anaconda, like we're trying to do things so fast. So like how do we slow it down enough so like we're making sure that the quality of our content is still really high and that we're working with the best people, and but also making sure people are getting more content in a regular basis. So the pace is definitely a challenge too.
Right. Yeah, actually, the pace of publication or content creation, as you mentioned, is it's really different.
Because like I mean, especially with video, it takes a lot of time. You have to do kind of all this editing, and you develop a lot of content. So I would love to hear more about like, how does the pace feel to you? Do you feel like a lot of pressure to develop a ton of content? What is your like, I don't know, like your schedule like for when you develop, video content?
Right. Yeah, sure. Like let's start from academia. Like, like the typical content creation would be like do research and then publish it, but before publishing it, writing a research article and then working on it like with 10 other colleagues who are a part of the research team. And, like every research article would be like a project on its own. And at any given point in time, I would work on like maybe 5 or more articles at the same time. And the first author and other like middle authors are helping out to collaboratively write the contents. And finally, I would vet the article and prepare it into the format for the various publisher, because like every publisher have their own unique guidelines and formatting. And actually, like there was a crazy thought during one of our coffee chat. I asked the team, would it be awesome if we could create something that could, like automatically write research articles for us, like take a research graph that we plotted from our experiment, and then like magically have it write out like the text, like describing the results and all that. And that was like before GPT-4 or ChatGPT was even released. And I think we had that discussion like 2 to 3 years ago. And it's amazing that, like at the beginning of the year with the release of ChatGPT but GPT has been around for quite some time. And it's amazing at the fast pace of the field, and, like LLM, large language models are, like a big thing now in research as well. And yeah, it's amazing to see how the field is evolving. And actually, I would love to, like link that to our second question is, like in your opinion, how has data science evolved like during the past 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think, data science has been this great funnel, for people to move into data. That if you're not super technical, I think it, gives, it offers you a lot of skills that are really connected to business goals, are really about communicating insights. And I think like the funnel has, the often quoted like data scientist is the hottest, sexiest job of the 21st century. I think that's changed to some degree. I think there's like this democratization of data science work, so that, if you want to move into data, you can be one of there's all these different roles now, right? There's data engineering and machine learning engineers, and data analysts, and then like the sort of collaboration of these different roles, so that there are actually fewer people now that call themselves data scientists, but more people in data. So that seems like there's, and I don't think that's going to change. I think we've, at O'Reilly, we talked about, data scientists may go away, because like, what does it mean to be a data scientist? And is that like the clearest description for what you do in that kind of role and working with data and sort of what you're able to do? So I think we'll continue to get quite a lot of people moving into data, but like something I noticed, O'Reilly published they do an annual report about their learning platform, and data engineering year over year is up 35%. So like that is a real like growth area right now. And it seems that way if that data is sort of reflective of sort of the industry as a whole. And I think the tools are allowing more the harder to more technical work to be done more easily. I think like stuff like Snowflake, very easy to use, and just like allowing more and more people to sort of to dive into their data and understand it better and communicate better about it. And so I think the opportunities with LLMs and more automation are going to continue to just like drive that funnel more and more. So I think it's still a very exciting space, and that like we need all kinds of different skills in the industry, right? So there's kind of like there's room for everyone, and there's tools to make the job easier, and that I think it's less scary now than it would have been earlier for someone who without a really technical background, or maybe they don't know Python, or maybe they don't know how to code yet. But like there are lots of ways to sort of move into this space, and I'm seeing more and more of that too.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, like a lot of like on Twitter, a lot of people are expressing fear, like our AI is it going to take away jobs? Like what are your viewpoints on that?
I think if your role is about if your work is about being like given specific tasks to do, and like especially if it's sort of like it's like relies on memorization, and that is going to be something that can get automated. Like those roles are going to shift. But if you're generating content, if you're driving new ideas, if you're communicating with people, if you're bringing people together, like those things you are not going to be easily automated or changed by, I think your job is going to get easier because like, for example, I use ChatGPT, like especially it's hard to kind of like, I think we're all very busy working in our startups and these technical jobs and technical companies that, when I've got an hour between meetings to like write up a piece of content, like if I can just get it started in ChatGPT, like that I can get that work done so much faster. And like you definitely like have to do your due diligence and like make sure the content that you're developing with this tool is correct and accurate. And that you get a second set of eyes to review that sort of stuff. And and it's knowing that it's pulling kind of like from a mediocre middle somewhere. It's like, taking the sort of stuff that's been done a lot and giving you that. So how do you improve on that? How do you make sure it's unique and it has your own perspective and point of view? And like as an editor, my whole life, like I feel like I have the skills to do that. But that can take some practice, So I think generally, automating like those kinds of tasks, like it's I don't see it replacing a ton of jobs. I think it certainly will, and it'll help people be more productive. But yeah, I think there's if you're worried that your job is going to go away, like start learning like prompt engineering, start like learning how to work with these tools so that like you can like that is a skill that's really going to be important. And people are making a ton of money doing this, which is wild. So start learning, like you have the skills to do it. And I think like we gotta like use the tools at our disposal, and that includes these, LLM tools.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that totally. And I remember there's a quote from Santiago, also a data influencer on Twitter. He mentioned about like a person not using AI will be replaced with a person using AI tools. And yeah, as you have mentioned, that clearly describes like the situation. And I've also like found like some guidelines from Elsevier publisher. They mentioned that they allow the use of ChatGPT, but then
I saw that
more or less for language help, right? Like kind of like in the context of like Grammarly or, but not to do like the actual literature writing, and yeah, that should be done like by a human.
Yeah, I agree with that stance. I think it's like let's let's let people again, like use Google, use the spell check, use Grammarly, use like these LLM tools. But check your sources and do the due diligence you would do when you find something on Wikipedia or whatever, it's like you still need to do that checking.
Yeah, and there's another tool I saw somewhere on online. I'm not sure what is it called. It analyzes your content. It analyzes how you write, the style you write, and actually, I got that idea, and then I created a prompt on ChatGPT and asking like, can you analyze my writing, and could you write a prompt that will generate a piece of content that has the same language style that I'm writing. And it did create this prompt, and then it almost sounded like what I would normally write, but there must be a lot of tweaking as well. But the idea is pretty cool and amazing, and hopefully
and I think
ChatGPT in the future would allow that.
Yeah, I think like that's the future, right? Is like training these models on our own data and training them to like sound and sound like us, look like us. I don't know. I like that's a little bit scary, but also like can really do some exciting things, right? So I'll be so curious to see like where this goes. But like, how do you feel about regulation? I think a lot of folks probably saw there was like this effort to like pause, sort of the progress toward like newer models. And I think there's certainly opportunities for regulating AI. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like that's necessary? Is that going to hinder progress? I'm sort of curious about your stance there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like a very a good question. Also quite controversial, and like personally, I think like technology should be used in a way that is also respecting ethical issue as well. Similar to like human cloning and like in science. I mean like it is possible, but then like ethically should it be performed, right? So I think the same stance should be with AI tools. I mean, I guess like freedom within limitation, like ethical limitation, is the way to go. But like exactly how, I guess that would be up to the policymaker and also the company in conjunction with them. Yeah.
I think there's a definite opportunity to I don't know that people have enough knowledge about data and AI ethics. Like, I think this is a real opportunity to inform everyone sort of what is ethical in data and AI, and like how do you develop an ethical framework to work within. So it's tough. I mean, ethics is a sort of I had a former colleague call these like eat your vegetables kind of topics, because like you kind of you need to know it, but like maybe you don't want to or you're maybe not as motivated. But we've got to find ways to like develop that knowledge base and like find like encourage it and enforce that, either enforce it if there isn't that motivation, that like companies need to have all of their the users like understand ethics before they're developing content or AI tools sort of in the space, that sort of thing. It's like I would love to see more of that, and that's something we're definitely driving some data ethics content around to try to like, okay, like start here before you start going too far down the deep end in these like really powerful tools.
Exactly. It pretty much like brings me to this quote from Spider-Man, right? Like, like with great power comes great responsibility. And I think this holds really true. And ChatGPT or AI tools in general have a lot of, immense potential. And if we could understand like what is the ethical limit of such tool, I mean, it's so powerful, but then like there must be a limit to it, a certain extent. And I guess everyone will be happy.
Right. Yeah, I think there's lots of work to do here for sure.
For sure. Right. So you're currently working as a director of learning solutions over at Anaconda. in your viewpoint, how is Anaconda contributing to the current state of the data science field?
Yeah, so Anaconda has, it's 11 years old now, and has been just a huge proponent of open source, since its inception. We continue to drive that, and contribute to the space. So, Anaconda, we've just announced last PyCon, PyScript. So PyScript.com is now live, which is exciting. So folks can play around with basically coding Python in the browser, which is very fun. We're working on all these kind of cool examples and applications. So definitely encourage folks to try that out. So we have a team at Anaconda working on that. I work with them closely to develop training around PyScript. So some of that is coming out shortly. In fact, we have a sort of getting started with PyScript.com event happening May 2nd and 4th, which I encourage folks to check out. And we're over at learning.anaconda.cloud. So I think we're, our mission at Anaconda is to empower data literacy for everyone. So we do that in all these ways: developing content, developing tools, developing just pathways to learn more about data science, to learn Python, to be able to work within a Python environment. That's really exciting. We're going to be at PyCon. We'd love for folks to come chat with us. It's a really exciting space. There's just so much to do. There's so much we can accomplish. There's so many tools at our disposal. So we're pulling all these different levers. We're working kind of with educational outreach to, most universities use Anaconda, which is very exciting. But, our learning platform is brand new. We only launched in October. So just like spreading the word, being on shows like yours and talking to people about what we're able to do. So I'd love to talk with folks about, what they want to learn. What skills are they having a hard time? Maybe they need to upskill. They don't know where to start. I think we have this opportunity because we're starting from scratch is to curate that experience. So rather than being a place where there's hundreds of Python courses, we'll have a few. We'll be like, take this one, then this one, then this one, and then you'll be, and find ways to assess folks and develop certifications and things like that. So we have some definite plans around those areas, this year. And working with academic institutions, universities and community colleges who have data science, programs and just, helping them get their students up to speed. So lots of, there's I know every time I talk about it, there's so much to do. How do we do it all? But we're growing our teams and we have some just really incredible, very smart people at Anaconda who are so invested in education and sort of in giving back and helping other people learn, that it's just very motivating.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. And before joining tech, when I was in academia, my research group used Anaconda practically on every of our devices, particularly because we love Conda as well.
Yeah.
I personally like to use Miniconda and then programmatically install libraries and manage environments, and in all of the tutorials on my YouTube channel, I would version the environment using Miniconda, and I guess it's a great way to store or manage the environment for Python. And also late last year I stumbled upon there's the Jupyter Notebook platform from Anaconda as well. And could you tell us about that as well?
Sure. Yeah. So Anaconda Notebooks, they are free. So you can go in, you can open a cloud notebook in 2 seconds, really, and start coding, which is so exciting. We use the notebook service quite a lot for learning. Most of our courses encourage you to create a new notebook, or maybe give you a sort of a notebook that's mostly filled out to start, to allow you to sort of get learning really quickly. And get practice. So there's some capacity limits to the free service. But then, so if you want to upgrade to a higher capacity notebook, that's part of our starter tier. So starter tier also includes all of our learning content, and this the cloud notebooks. That's sort of the higher capacity. And that's like $9 a month. So we want, again, like want it to be really accessible to folks, and just like help empower them, in their projects. So yeah, notebooks are great. There's a lot of like cool ways. It's one tool, and I think we use it a lot. And there's, I think, other tools and other opportunities down the road. Script is another one. So I think like giving folks ways to play around with their code in a variety of ways, I think is really important.
Awesome. Yeah. And like for the free tier, is you mentioned there's like a limit. But in terms of like the number of notebooks that a user could like create, is there any limit on that,
Nope.
or is it like, yeah?
Yeah, it has to do with CPU seconds. So that's where it gets a little bit more technical than a little over my head. But there's I think if you're doing, for example, you can use free notebooks for any of our kind of standard learning courses. It's when you're starting to do more work in machine learning where you hit the capacity limit, just because of like the amount of data and sort of the CPU runtime that it's going to require. That's when you start running into that. But you can create any as many notebooks as you want, download them, bring them elsewhere. We're working on sharing capabilities in the near future, access to all kinds of cool things within notebooks, data visualization tools and data sets. So yeah, we're excited to be able to roll out some more features around our notebook service in the very short.
Right. Does it come pre-installed with like all of the essential libraries for doing data science?
It does. It comes with the same as Anaconda distribution does. So yeah, so it means you can get started right away with Pandas, scikit-learn, kind of all the sort of standard libraries that you probably use all the time.
Right. Yeah. 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 Hovering back to the statement you mentioned about like building a platform like for allowing users to use Python in like different capacities. You mentioned about like having Anaconda for desktops or laptops, and then having PyScript for the web online platform. And how about like mobile platform? Is there any solution from Anaconda there?
Not that I'm necessarily, very well could be, but not that has necessarily crossed my desk yet. I think decoding is still a very like machine like focus, having to working on your laptop or your desktop or sort of, yeah, I think there are certainly going to be opportunities for mobile. I think there's potential with sort of like block style coding tools, stuff like that, where there's certainly some tooling around that. And I think that it's an area for a lot of opportunity, especially if you're coding in a browser. It only makes sense that that your mobile device is good. You're going to want to be able to do that there too. So we're definitely thinking about. I think PyScript is probably as far as I'm aware the most closely related to that initiative. But yeah, it's tough. It's like. I kind of wonder like how many folks are like coding on there. Do you code on your mobile device?
Not necessarily code, but then you're like doing code review or making some minor edits to the code. Typically I would go to GitHub and then edit the code there.
Yeah, same. So yeah, and sort of related and kind of related to what we were talking about before. So was Python when did you learn Python, and had you learned to code in other languages prior to that?
Right. Yeah. So actually Python was like the third or fourth language that I actually learned to code. The first one, if you count HTML, then that was back when I was about I think 16. When I was 16 in 1998. And then I attempted to learn C, but then that really didn't work. And then I attempted to learn Java. Got the grasp of the concept, but not really into coding at that time. And then finally, one of my student or research assistant. He was doing research in the group, and he actually referred me to Python. And yeah, so he gave me a book on Python, and then I tried, coding, and whenever I have any issues or problems, I would ask him for debugging advice. And like over time, Python was really easy to use, and that led me to eventually catch R. And then, like at the time, yeah, I used R for creating web apps, and I created videos on my YouTube channel. And then someone on the channel asked, like, "What about Python?" And then they suggested, like other libraries like Streamlit, and then I've created a tutorial series of Streamlit, and like there's so many like things that I learned from the subscriber and also from my students as well. Yeah, so like learning is an never-ending journey.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. My experience was similar. I don't call myself a programmer by any stretch, but I did learn C++ in high school, and in Java, I think in high school and in college, and then like did not code again for, I don't know, 20 years. And then while at O'Reilly, I kind of had to know kind of a surface level of the sort of space and kind of understanding the kind of general idea around Python and popular packages and things like that. But it was once I like took a course and was like, I'm going to just take an intro to Python course. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I remember how to do this. Like I all came, kind of coming back to like riding a bike, I guess. And was like, oh, and felt like it was so easy to learn because I had like sort of the kind of remembering Java worked and stuff like that. So I felt like it was so helpful. I think I took the course right before coming over to Anaconda, and like it just immediately kind of like gave me the language to like talk with others, to understand like what they were working with, what their challenges were. And again, like you just said, like learning is a journey. So I'm always sort of learning more, but yeah, there's it's great. I think I recommend to anyone, like just take a Python course, like just sort of get in the space a little bit, because like just it helps things make sense. It's very logical. I'm a very logical person. I like logic, so it was really helpful for me.
Cool. Yeah. Speaking of Python, and like all the various learning platforms that Anaconda is supporting, are you intending to have any platform geared towards kids? Like like you mentioned briefly about having this visual programming, similar to Scratch, perhaps. And yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so we are definitely interested in empowering learners of all ages. And we know that like young students are learning Python. So yeah, we definitely want to, though our launch of Anaconda Learning was really focused on practitioners. We want to grow in all directions. We want to grow into more sophistication, people doing more challenging, more technical, more complicated work, and machine learning and AI and all these GPUs, et cetera. But also, thinking like younger and earlier, and like, yeah, how do we give those folks the tools that they need to be able to learn Python? So so there's so definitely big opportunities in that space. We have we talk, like I said, we talk to folks in academia and professors, and we're doing for example a data science expo. We're doing a few of them in Austin, in Durham, North Carolina, and in Singapore this year. So for those, we're giving students some tools. It's a competition event, so we're giving them tools and data sets to work with, and some sort of structure in terms of, okay, like you get to decide what problem you want to solve, but here are some themes, like climate and society, for example, and like here are some data sets you might consider working with, and or you can work with a different data set. You can bring whatever data set you want. And how do you solve a problem? And then students they're high school age students who can create teams of up to 3. And so they're working on their projects right now, which is really cool. There's some exciting stuff happening. And Some are like creating music. Some are like, it's like all over the place. Some are coming up with solutions for to combat like school shootings. Like, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And then so they will come together at the Data Science Expo to present their projects. And then there's also like a live coding event that's part of these expos as well. So we're really excited to be working with young learners and to learn from them. I think I think it's so hard. You have to really like get into the brain of like of teenagers, what problems do they want to solve, and like how do we help them? So it's a really exciting challenge. Definitely like lots of opportunity for us there.
Right. Yeah. And I certainly think like, like learning to code, as you also mentioned about like the logic as well, it really opens up doors of opportunities. And like for myself, I mean, being in this data domain and working in tech and, like doing research in academia, all of these are like made possible essentially owing to, like coding in Python and R as well. And I think it would, like the course of my life would probably be different if I have learned coding earlier.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely would benefit a lot of the early learners of Python.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think learn to code. It's, and if it's not for you, cool, like that's fine. But like, I think it does really open up opportunities, even if you're not going to be a programmer. It does. It's just such a great skill.
Right. Yeah. Like for me, I'm not a programmer and I'm working currently as a developer advocate. And, like it's like the core of my job is, like coding, like making tutorials, teaching how to build this app. And essentially like, like it wouldn't have been possible without coding. And yeah.
It's very cool work, I think, developer advocates and developer relations folks. I think I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I'm not technical enough yet, but like, I think it's just so fun that I think like to be able to just be around people who are in try to help give them the tools they need to solve the problems and yeah, just and being physically in front of people frequently is great. Especially, I mean, I know after the pandemic, I just need to be around people as much as possible. I work from home and I have my dog, but like, I need more people in my life. So, I think, and I think also there's this, I think, really heartening trend that I think some of the more social aspects of data, working in data are really coming back full force. Like there's, happy hours in all these different cities that are really, really popular. Ethan Aaron has low-key data happy hour that he started in New York, but now like all these at Boston, we have one, Vancouver, like Austin, all these cities are sort of taking that model and repeating it and seeing like tons of people show up because like everyone wants to be connected to each other, to help each other out in their careers, to just like talk about what they're working on in a way that's not like pitching and not sponsored and and really is more just is more real. So that's really exciting to see. I've been to a few conferences lately where the kind of like, happy hour or the party before, whatever, which used to be kind of like corny and like not always like really exciting. They're like really well attended. People are totally excited. They want to be there. So I love seeing that. I love seeing the opportunities to network with each other when, a lot of us are not working in an office together anymore. Those opportunities are still available. And I think there's like lots of ways we can sort of, do more around that. I think we're just figuring it out again. So I love that.
Cool. Yeah, I certainly see it. There's a lot of, like meetups like on data or coding or Python meetup groups, like also in Bangkok as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me. No, I love to see that. I'm going to try to hit up someone I'm in Salt Lake City for PyCon. Boston, it's funny. There's like not as many. I don't know. Like I'm like, wake up, Boston. Let's figure it out. Or either that or like I haven't come across them. But I think there's it would be really great to do more of that. I've been going down to New York a little bit to try to catch with folks there, and so, and New York is like really happening. Like there's just a lot of energy around getting together. So it's exciting. There's lots we can do.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Could we hover back to like developer relations a little
Sure.
bit? Over at Anaconda, like how's the developer relations or developer advocate team over there?
Yeah, we do. We have three developer advocates, and they are very busy. There's so many projects that we're working on. They all have their interest in different areas. So they're developing content and presentations and training and all these kinds of things around everything from PyScript to data visualization, machine learning, like it's like nothing they can't do, it seems. So that's really exciting. They're very, very active. And they're at conferences all the time. So yeah, Sophia Yang, Chuck Ho, and Valerio Maggio are all kind of like out there talking PyCon, talking about Python and in PyScript and all these things that we're working on. And I think all three of them will be at PyCon as well. So I'm sure they would love to meet folks, like come talk to us and like tell us what you're working on and and how we can help you. I think there's a lot of ways we can do that.
Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, so also hovering back to like our question about like the current state of data science. I recall there's like a handbook that Anaconda publishes about that. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so we do we do a state of data science report every year. So we do a big survey, asking about what folks are working on, what their challenges are, what they're still trying to learn, how their companies are evolving around data science. So that should be coming up soon. But you can check out the State of Data Science report from 2022. And it's still very relevant and I think really fascinating. I was familiar with this report back when I was at O'Reilly. It was just such a helpful resource to understand the space and understand the people working in data and what their needs are. So yeah, highly recommend checking that out. That's available on anaconda.cloud. Or if you just Google State of Data Science, Anaconda, it'll come up for you. Definitely a lot of really useful information there.
Yeah, definitely highly recommended for any aspiring data professionals as well. And like when I always Google like what are some of the skill sets for data scientists, like that report and also like the one from I think what's the Stack Overflow or JetBrains, is it? Like like on Python ecosystem. They would all come out and they provide really great like bird's eye view of the current skill sets.
It's and you also like what tools and technologies are becoming more popular or growing or like losing. It's funny, I think on one of those, probably the Stack Overflow, that R was taking a dip in terms of like versus other programming languages, what people were learning, and people like kind of like freaked out and they're like, oh no, R is gonna die, and then like the next year was back up again. So like you have to like look at the trends like over years because like things do change a lot, but also it's tempting to make kind of a quick like snap judgment on when sort of a tool maybe loses some market share or people are trying different solutions. So so I think it's really the Stack Overflow one is another one that I referenced a lot, and it was helpful in terms of like what should we be publishing on, what tools are relevant and what are people using them for, and but also like not jumping on kind of the quick the quick trends that might or fads that are just going to disappear in the short term, especially when you're publishing literal paper books. Like you've got to be really smart that you're developing content that's going to last you 3 to 5 years or more, and stays relevant. So, but I think certainly these types of reports are really informative and like that's that's what you got to do. You got to stay on top of things. It's really hard if you don't have your finger on the pulse. Like you can lose track of like where the space is going.
Cool, right? Could you take us like behind the scenes of how such a report is developed? How much
Yeah,
like is
a
going
little
on
bit.
behind there? Mhm.
Yeah, so I was not super personally involved in a lot of it, but we do we generate the survey, we work on it, we sort of tweak it, every year,
Mhm.
obviously, and sort of over the year, contribute thoughts about what we should be asking about. We released a survey to the folks that we have access to, and I want to say we had something like between 1,500, 2,000 respondents last year. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere around there. And then we review all the information that we get from respondents. We have a lot of data scientists at Anaconda, so folks who to review that data, to develop some insights around it, to visualize sort of what that data really means, and communicate, the sort of the most relevant information. And so we develop the actual written report, and it gets designed and it gets, we were promoted and all of that. And we also tend to we develop sort of a live event around it to kind of talk through what we've learned and sort of what it means and that sort of stuff. So usually our CEO Peter Wang is on that event, and often we have another guest to kind of just like maybe someone outside of Anaconda to really think about what does this mean for the industry. So yeah, it's a really great resource, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm not sure where we stand on that just yet, but I have no doubt we have another one coming.
Awesome. Right. Yeah. And speaking of, like advices for emerging or novice or aspiring data scientists, based on your opinion, what are your advice?
I think getting the fundamentals is like the most important thing. I know like machine learning is very hot and sexy and all these things, but like, I think one of the areas that are really important is to be able to, that you're not just focused on technical skills, but you're also developing your sort of like soft skills in terms of like communicating about data and telling a story with data. And that's not just about data viz tools, right?
Right.
So being able to, yeah, and communicating with like the business and being able I think one of the things that trips people up is that they talk too much about data, like with their business stakeholder, with people and with their business leaders. And people don't care about the data. They want to know like, how are you driving business goals? Like, don't care how you do it, but like what is it? What are you helping to achieve? So being able to like talk to folks from the language of business rather than the language of data takes practice, right? And I think is a really good there's I think a lot of good opportunities for you to be really for you to keep your job and like to be really important in your organization, because you can meet people where they are, right? Instead of going sort of way down the rabbit hole of like what you did with your data. So that's one piece. In the fundamentals, I think like I'm a huge proponent of learning math. Like, and it doesn't mean you need a math degree, but you should definitely get feel like you understand the basics of like linear algebra, statistics, probability, calculus, like linear regression, so that like you understand like how like these models and APIs work, under the hood. I think that's like really important and will like serve you really well in the long run. So those are the few things I would recommend is, thinking about, it's the same thing I say about publishing is like, it's a business, and thinking about the ways that you're driving business value is super important and will serve you very, very well over the years.
Right. Yeah, I certainly agree with you. And yeah, it's an understated or like not so much of a hype about like like business communication and also like data storytelling. Like having data and the ability to take that data and create a story around it. As you mentioned, like how does the data drive value for business and operations? And it's kind of like like if you're focusing too much on the technology, like using this algorithm and but then like we might be missing out on like what are the bigger picture, how is it, as you mentioned, like how is it driving business value and operations. And yeah, it's certainly an area I myself would like to explore more into, like storytelling. Like
Yeah.
there's so many ways, like like there could be visual storytelling, there could be data storytelling, and like how do you like start out from a general idea and then kind of like creating a novel, like with sequential timeline for various data to be displayed and in a more coherent manner.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I guess like like there's so many data visualizations that are available out there, and how can you pick and choose, and how can you create visualized data with appropriate colors, like with appropriate font sizes, and like how do you highlight certain aspects, but without um without like what do you say, without manipulating the data findings, but
Right.
yeah, making it visually appealing. And
Yeah, the sort of data visualization user experience, right? Yeah, a couple of people in the space that I think are that are interesting to listen to, and who both have books, are Scott Taylor and Kate Strackney. Scott has a data storytelling book that I've only been able to really dive into briefly, but I have I want to sort of dive into a little bit more. And then Kate Strackney has her book Color Wise, which is really about kind of just what you're talking about, the sort of data visualization and color, and sort of accessibility and things that I
right.
really think about.
Yeah, exactly. And like personally, when I was in academia, like like checking thesis books when students would submit them before the actual dissertation, there's a lot of like common mistakes, like a font size are too small. There are redundant Y labels when you're having when you're copying pasting like 10 plots of the same plot, but then you're repeating the Y-axis label, and how do you like take the redundancy out. And yeah, fonts are too small, dots are not really clear, like the color. And also like when we're printing it in black and white, and like there's a lot of, as you mentioned, that Kate has this awesome book. And I guess if we could take that book and give it back to the students like 10 years ago, I guess that would be an awesome way to improve upon.
It's hard to like get out of your own head and like imagine like someone coming fresh to the information that you're trying to communicate, and how to present it in the best format. So I think listening to folks who like are really familiar with sort of the tips and techniques is like super helpful for you to kind of like imagine, get out of your own perspective a little bit and see it that way.
Right. Exactly. And also like maybe personally, if I create something and like with fresh eyes from other people, it would also be great as well. Because sometimes like the obvious mistake, we don't see it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Again, it's like making sure you're not siloed, making sure that you've got, groups of folks that can give you their candid opinion, and that, you can help make your work better is super important, whether you're writing, you're doing data viz, like whatever you're working on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of working, like in the midst of the pandemic and, like remote work, could you provide us your perspectives of remote work, and is it effective? What could be better?
It's so I've worked remotely for kind of a long time now. When I was at O'Reilly, actually, though, we have Boston office, and I would go in a few times a week. I like elected to do that, because I like wanted to be around people. I wanted to be in the city and around, and face to face, and I find that very valuable. But now at Anaconda, we are fully remote first. And though we were based in Austin, we no longer have an office. We are global. And there are not a lot of folks in the Boston area where I am. So there's fewer opportunities for me to kind of like just jump into an office and hang. So that sucks. Yes, I really like being around people. And working remotely is convenient, certainly in a lot of ways. And I think I am probably a lot more productive from home, but it is really harder to like police your, your work-life balance, and to like set a time to like put work away. It's just like, it's just so easy. It's right there. And, and I think we all have too much work, we all like, we're all like never going to get it all done. But, just understanding that like, or like working a weekend and which I'll do it on occasion and just be like, oh, I want a head start on Monday, but like, there's just going to be more work on Monday. So like, finding ways to like keep yourself like sane and happy. And I'm need more strategies to do that, the time management. But, and I think there's I'm working on delegation skills and things like that. I'm lucky to have a team that that can help me. So being able to ask for help is certainly a skill that that is helpful. But yeah, so I think there's now that like I've been remote for this long, it's just like it's hard to imagine, like, it's really hard to imagine, like, if I'm not going anywhere, but if I were ever to go somewhere else and they're like, oh, you got to be in the office, I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, that's crazy. Like, sure, I'll come in when I feel like it, but, otherwise it's just it's a different experience. And I say that coming from like a lot of privilege and like, excuse me, that in a tech space where, obviously if you're a teacher or if you're a nurse or something, like you don't have that sort of flexibility. So, I think for certain sectors, remote work totally makes sense and is probably improving, a lot of our work and sort of how productive we can be. I think folks are probably a lot more productive. I'm just making that up. I don't have data to support it, but I suspect that people are more productive from home, just given the flexibility. And we have a flexible work schedule too. I mean, I tend to be at a sort of 9 to 5 anyway, just with the number of meetings I attend and whatnot. But we do have that sort of arrangement, so you can work when it helps when you need to, and you can set work aside when you need to. So yeah, I think we're learning a lot. I don't think anyone's like got it totally figured out, right? I think like and there's this whole like 4-day work week thing, like, and definitely folks are trying that out with some success. Right. So, yeah, I think, everyone's doing a lot of different things. But I think the sort of come every day to an office, if that's not something that is a real requirement for your job, is, that's not necessarily like the best, practice, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, like, like when I was in academia prior to joining tech, it was like the beginning of the pandemic. And, like immediately universities were shut down and everyone had to work from home. But then luckily I was a YouTuber like slightly before the pandemic happened, and like creating courses online and was not too bad for me. A lot of the concerns of like a lot of the teaching staffs, they were not really accustomed to creating content online, and sometimes I would record like a short how-to, like, okay, this is how you could record your screen using OBS, and like how you could connect your mic and all that. And certainly it was a booster to help drive the teaching staff to embrace online learning. Like within a short period of time, like everyone was creating online courses, which would not have been possible, like before the pandemic. Yeah,
it's definitely a different skill set, and it's very time consuming. Right, so indeed. And especially if you're not used to it, like once you've done it enough, it probably gets a lot easier. But I think that it's a big jump from in person to online. And some folks definitely prefer in person and some don't. So yeah, I think it's sort of, if you have the flexibility, it kind of depends on what your skill set is.
Right. Yeah. And like video editing is like an entire world of like a lot of things to learn about. And I'm only at the beginning stages, and like other fellow YouTubers, they're at more advanced stages. And like if you're looking at the timeline of their editing, like when we're talking now, if I'm editing this particular video, it would have the A roll, and there's the audio. But other, like for a other typical YouTube video, they would add B-roll as well. Aside from the talking head A-roll, and there could be other sound effects, sound editing, and like whenever a text appear, there will be this thing, and there's so many small details, and like the transition from like one slide to the other, and there's so many things.
So it's overwhelming, right? Like, I mean, the people who do it well, it's really impressive, and it's like I can't imagine how long it takes them, to do all that work. So I think I don't know. I wonder, I've sort of thought that like with everyone moving, like we at O'Reilly, we would do, on demand sort of recorded video. But we'd have a studio, we would fly people out, we'd have some real professionals doing that work. And then during the pandemic, I think the sort of like expectation for like the level of quality, like what, there's a lot of forgiveness around that. So like, you could, again, like just from home, like create online video content. And I feel like we're starting to like tick back up in terms of expectations of quality. But I don't know, what do you think about sort of like what people expect in terms of kind of video content?
Yeah, like on YouTube in particular, like people, I mean, the obvious one, I mean, for anyone would be to have a visually appealing video. But then actually, like myself or other YouTubers, they would agree that having good audio would be like the number one thing for every YouTube video. I mean, people could withstand, like poor images, but then, like if you have like choppy audio, like, or the audio is not so appealing to the ear, it might hurt them, and like that might turn them away. Yeah, so having good audio, is number one.
Yeah, so and it's so interesting because especially in this like data science, data engineering space, like everybody's starting a podcast, like it's pretty wild. Like who has time to like listen to all these podcasts? But so audio is such an important format, and a lot of people, a lot of people love audio and audiobooks and podcasts and things like that. And like I think this area has grown quite a lot. But with it, I agree. I think like the quality has to be good. So friends of mine who do podcasts, their audio isn't good, I give them a hard time. So like, I don't know if they're going to listen, but I tend to agree that, if you're kind of like listening to a podcast while you're doing the dishes, cooking, or like taking a walk, or whatever, like that, the audio quality is really important, and that you want to be able to like, make the best use of your time, and, or listen to it fast or whatever, I totally agree. That's an important aspect.
Right. Yeah. And there are tools, like from Adobe, they have this audio enhancer for a podcast. They're currently free, and I've experimented with that like for the last 2 to 3 episodes on the channel, and it really helped with the audio quality as well.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah, but actually that tip was from a fellow YouTuber who is Thai. His name is Henry, and he has a channel. He's also working in tech in the US remotely, though we haven't really met. But I would watch his video and comment in the comment section, and he would provide some like tips, and like interacting with other fellow YouTuber, whether on YouTube or Twitter. I mean, there's always something to learn.
I love it. Yeah, we've gotta help each other out here, right?
Right. Awesome. So I guess we've covered a lot of topics. There's a question that I think a lot of the data scientists would love to hear about. What are your thoughts on the biggest concerns for data scientists?
Yeah. I think we've touched on quite a few of them. Like being able to communicate, business value, sort of knowing what's happening with your like algorithms, your APIs under the hood. I think ethics we've talked about as well. I think like knowing the provenance of your data, like knowing where your data comes from, being aware of inherent biases in your data, super important. And I think like just building the sort of analytical skills that are going to be useful for you regardless of what tool you're working with, or what language you're coding in. I think is all those things definitely are all really important.
Yeah, I guess it's also related to aspiring data professionals who are looking to break into the field. What are your opinion about, like, is Python required for a data professional who's interested in working at a company similar to or at Anaconda? Are they required to know Python as a prerequisite for applying?
Definitely not. No, actually, there's a lot of folks at Anaconda who don't use Python, don't code in Python, or maybe do work that like it doesn't really require it. And that's okay. I think like you definitely like use the tools that that serve you well for your work. Python is great. It's a great skill to have. And certainly if you've got the time, again, like learning a little bit of Python can serve you very well. And I think we are potentially, I think tech is, we've had a lot of growth for a long time, and I think that growth is slowing down. And we're seeing folks that are getting laid off, and companies are slowing hiring and things like that. So being able to stand out is really important. So learning Python can help you do that for sure. And I think, but most important is like being able to demonstrate, what you've accomplished, what your projects, your portfolio, that sort of thing, even more so than like a boot camp or certification in data science. I mean, there's some areas where certification is super useful, and security and cloud programming as well. So, but being able to just demonstrate what you projects that you've done, and demonstrating again like the business value, not necessarily like the every detail of how you've done them, but I think developing a strong portfolio is, I think, really important. We're developing, I think probably in May, we're going to have a course on best practices for your data science portfolio, is some opportunities for folks at Anaconda to give feedback on portfolio projects. So there's some exciting opportunities down the road to help users with that. I think that's super valuable in terms of growing your career.
Right. Yeah, I really agree. And like every video on my channel, I would end with the quote of the best way to learn data science is to do data science, and doing portfolio is a great way to apply what you have learned into tangible project.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think one of the last questions would be, in the data science domain, what are your opinions about the demand in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it's going to grow. I think like people, people need folks who can. So it's like the last few years has been all about like collecting all the data, like storing everything. Like we'll figure out how it's valuable later. Like data is inherently valuable, which like I think we're realizing now is like not true. Like, being able to like derive insight from your data, having clear access to it, knowing where it comes from, being able to clean it, and being able to use it and drive business value. That is like, I think the real challenge now. But they, organizations need folks who can do that effectively. So the need has not changed, in terms of having folks who can do that sort of analytical work. So I think that will continue to grow. Maybe, maybe not at quite the growth rate that we've had over the few years while invest, if like, rates for investing have been very low. And like now that we're seeing, rates increasing, that sort of innovation is likely to slow down a little bit. So hopefully like not too much. But again, I think there's no doubt that that kind of work is still super valuable to organizations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And yeah, so I guess this is the last question for the podcast. And yeah, how could we read more about you, and where can we find you?
Yeah. So definitely LinkedIn is a great place to connect. I'm Jess Haberman over there. And would love for folks to check out learning.anaconda.cloud. I'll share a promo code so folks can get some free access for a while. and start to check out the content there. If we'd love if you'd reach out and let us know what else you want us to, what else other kinds of courses or learning content you'd like to see, what you're hoping to learn. And if you're interested in developing training courses, like we'd love to work with new folks. We work with people outside of Anaconda. We work with anyone who has some good information to be able to teach our users. So yeah, definitely like let us know what you think. We'd love to learn more.
Awesome. Yeah. So all of the mentioned links will be in the video description. And yeah, so thanks, Jess, once again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.